It's really incredible to think about how things have changed over the past year. When I talked to Governor Pence here at the State Fair in 2015, he had just signed the so-called RFRA fix a few months earlier, but he was still dealing with a lot of outrage from people about that issue. Now he is the Republican vice presidential nominee, and he's dealing with outrage once again, this time about Donald Trump.
Right, Freedom Plaza here was pretty peaceful. We saw people with signs, we saw small groups move through chanting, but it was nothing violent. But we started to hear people talk about other protests going on.
Donald Trump targeted Chuck Jones in two tweets. The first one, he says that Chuck Jones did a terrible job representing workers. No wonder companies flee the country. In the next, he said if United Steelworkers was any good, they would have kept those jobs in Indiana.
How long are we looking before the jobs are all gone?
He says the timeline is a little fuzzy, but it looks like they'll start layoffs in September, and then all of the jobs should be gone by the end of the year. And then we also have to think about Rexnord. That's just a mile down the way from Carrier. Their layoffs start next month and should be done by June.
And Chuck Jones very involved with Rexnord and Carrier. We heard from him in your story. What's his future like now?
He says he's actually about ready to retire. He's
wow.
going to step down on May 31st. He said he stuck around a little bit longer than he intended because of the Carrier and Rexnord situations, but now it's time for him to step away.
Okay. All right.
There are big steps still to happen before then.
Right. The City County Council has the final say. They actually don't have to raise taxes by 0.25%. They can choose not to raise taxes at all, or they can choose to raise them by a lesser amount. So really, with this vote, you're giving the City County Council permission to raise taxes.
From the beginning, we knew that road funding would be a major issue at the State House throughout this entire session.
Well, the bill doesn't specifically name Tesla, but if it becomes law, the company says the measure would essentially push Tesla out of the state. On the other side of the debate, some car dealers say this bill will protect consumers and save jobs.
I think Tesla's a great product. I think they have an awesome car.
But you won't find one at Dellin Automotive Family in Greenfield. To buy a Tesla in Indiana, you go to its store at the Fashion Mall. Traditional automakers don't sell straight to consumers. The law requires they sell through dealers.
We have to have a service facility, parts facility. We have to have so many parking spots.
The long-standing franchise laws are meant to keep automakers like GM and Ford from competing with their own dealers. Tesla argues since it doesn't use dealers, the laws don't apply. Third-generation dealer Nick Dellin says that's not fair.
Everybody should have to play by the same rules.
And Tesla with its driver
Mitch Ralsky owns a Tesla and wants to buy another one in Indiana.
They can try to make the claim that they're trying to level a playing field, but the only thing they're trying to do is to eliminate competition.
Lawmakers are considering a bill that would ban manufacturers from selling directly to consumers if it meets specific requirements. The company must use a dealership after 6 years in business or after it sells 1,000 cars. So while the bill doesn't mention Tesla, Tesla fits the bill.
It's not about Tesla. It's about what Tesla's doing. They found a loophole, which we just need to get that loophole closed.
The fact that they don't own it is somewhat laughable because everyone knows it's all about the Model 3.
Tesla's Model 3 will be a more affordable version of the electric car. Hundreds of thousands of people have reserved one.
If you have more of those vehicles out there, there's more of a possibility of them breaking down. And how are they going to be serviced without a service facility?
Tesla says it's opening a service center in Indy this spring, but if customers have an issue now, a team will come to your home and fix the car.
Dealers are living in a world and a time that just doesn't exist anymore.
That's something on dealers' minds. If Tesla's business model takes off and tech giants like Google or Apple make their own cars, dealers worry their industry could become obsolete.
If there is no dealer network, all those jobs go away.
The notion that they're doing this to protect consumers, it's clearly more about protecting the manufacturers and the auto dealers.
Tesla gave us a statement about the bill, saying in part, this is now the third time industry opponents have attempted to limit consumer choice and challenge our ability to operate in Indiana despite a clear demand among residents for our vehicles. We're committed to our current and future customers, to creating jobs, and to preserving our ability to operate in the state. A committee will hear the bill at 11:30 this morning. We did reach out to the bill's author, but he would not speak to us. Former Mayor Greg Ballard wrote a letter to lawmakers urging them to vote against the bill. You can read it and get more information on our website, wishtv.com. Good morning. The White House says Trump will meet with the Mexican president on January 31st to start negotiations. Trump has called NAFTA the worst trade deal in history. He blames it for the losses of many manufacturing jobs in the United States. You'll likely hear a lot about NAFTA in the coming days, so let's go over what it is. NAFTA is a trade agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It essentially eliminated tariffs between the three countries. Before NAFTA, imported goods were taxed. After, they were not. The goal was to lower the cost of goods and boost trade between the countries. Trade has tripled between the three countries since NAFTA went into effect, and American consumers benefit from cheaper clothes, food, cars, and electronics that are made in Mexico. But there are some potential downsides as well. Critics say NAFTA is costing the United States jobs. U.S. manufacturing companies can take advantage of cheap labor in Mexico and send those goods back to the U.S. without being taxed. Think about Carrier. Here's what Trump said he'd do about NAFTA back in September.
Let's say Ford moves to Mexico. If they want to sell that car in the United States, they pay a tax. Here's what's going to happen. They're not going to build their plant there. They're going to build it in the United States.
But there is a North American free trade agreement.
And there shouldn't be. It's a disaster.
But it is there.
Yes,
if you're president, you're going to have to live with it.
We will either renegotiate it or we will break it. Because, you know, every agreement has an end.
It's important to note experts do not agree on the effects of NAFTA. A 2015 nonpartisan report from Congress found NAFTA did not cause the huge job losses critics had feared. There's also analysis out there that shows America has lost more jobs to automation than to Mexico. Again, Trump is set to meet with the Mexican president at the end of the month. He also says he'll soon meet with the Canadian Prime Minister. Of course, we'll keep you updated on this story. Scott and Lauren. The Red Line will be the city's first bus rapid transit line. Phase 1 is happening whether the referendum passes or not. A federal grant will pay to build it, and then money from the tax hike would pay for some of the day-to-day costs. But the Red Line is just one piece of the Marion County Transit Plan.
In this city of more than 850,000 people, everyone has something to do, someplace to be. Everyone is in constant motion, except for those who feel stuck.
Imagine if your garage door only opened once an hour, and that was the only time you could get your car out of the garage. That's what it's like with a bus stop that only comes once every hour.
The system has never really gotten people to where they need to go.
That's why Indigo says our city is long overdue for a public transit overhaul.
Indianapolis is the 33rd largest metro region in the country, and we only offer the 86th largest public transportation network.
Indigo says the Marion County Transit Plan will move us up to number 65, with buses that run earlier in the morning, more often during the day, and later at night. Plus, it will pave the way for 3 new bus rapid transit lines. The Red Line will initially run from Broad Ripple to Uwindy. The Blue Line would go from Cumberland to the airport, and the Purple Line would take riders from Lawrence to the downtown transit center. It all adds up to a 70% increase in service that Councilor Jeff Miller says Indianapolis desperately needs.
People want that freedom and that mobility. When we don't have it as a city, we fall down a couple tiers or many tiers. We don't compete well with other cities.
But not everyone thinks mass transit will move Indianapolis in the right direction.
We have other needs in our city: schools, fire, police, our roads, and so transit isn't the priority for us.
Aaron Tuttle with the group Stop the Red Line thinks the transit plan is a bad idea.
Indianapolis is a very convenient city to drive around in.
Miller argues driving is not very convenient for people who don't have a car.
If they can't get to their job, reliably get to their job. I mean, right now there's some situations where it's an hour and a half on the bus system to get from one side of town to the other. That's ridiculous.
The hours of service and the lack of frequency and the lack of weekend access really impede folks' ability to get to work.
If you hop on a bus here near 16th and Capitol now, this map shows the area Indigo says you can reach within an hour. This is what that map would look like if the plan goes forward. With the new system upgrades, Indigo says 57,000 more jobs will be within 60 minutes of this stop alone.
I'm voting yes because I think the people who work late shifts, they need to be able to get home
Opponents say the new system would not help people who need reliable transit the most. Tuttle questions why the first BRT line starts in Broad Ripple.
There's not a real demand for it here.
Tuttle believes an upgraded transit system would lead to higher fares, something people who rely on transit might not be able to afford.
Indigo hasn't adjusted our fares since 2009, and we're looking at the fares regardless of what happens with this plan. The plan doesn't propose a direct fare increase.
If the BRT lines take up a lane of traffic, some worry it will mean headaches for drivers, like congestion and less parking. Advocates say those issues won't last long as people stop driving cars and start taking transit.
You know, that's sort of a fingers crossed kind of an answer. That's a real hopeful idea that people are going to give up their cars and they're going to take transit.
Both sides can agree Indianapolis is at a crossroads.
If we don't do it now, we fall so far behind, you have to wonder whether we're going to have a public transit system, and that scares me a little bit.
Which direction our city turns is up to you.
Now here's exactly what Indigo says the transit tax could cost you. 0.25% tax increase means 25 cents for every $100 you make. If you make $42,000 a year, you'll pay an extra $105 annually. If you make $150,000, that's an extra $375 every year. Good morning. I sat down with ISDA President Teresa Meredith after Vice President Pence said he would likely cast the tie-breaking vote to confirm Betsy DeVos. Meredith told me she is discouraged, disappointed, and bothered by this situation. Meredith feels that education leaders are not consulted or included in the decisions that directly impact teachers, schools, and students. She says she wishes lawmakers would listen to her concerns. If DeVos is still confirmed after this nationwide backlash, Meredith says it will again show that lawmakers are focused on their own personal agenda and not the well-being of students. The teachers union often clashed with Vice President Mike Pence when he was governor here. Now it's quite possible that he will be the deciding vote to confirm Betsy DeVos.
It's not surprising to me in that he supports the privatization movement and the voucher movement. It's very concerning to me that he is not raising the flag saying, shouldn't we be talking to educators? Shouldn't we be looking for someone with at least an education background? Or shouldn't we at least find someone who knows something about K-12 public school?
Meredith says the Secretary of Education can impact public school funding, but she says much of the responsibility will lie with State Superintendent Jennifer McCormick. Meredith is waiting to see what direction McCormick will lead public schools. Now, we did reach out to McCormick. She said she did not want to speak with us about DeVos yet. Her office said if and when DeVos is confirmed, McCormick will release a statement. So, of course, that's another angle to the story that we'll keep watching.